Hey everyone, welcome to Inez Talks. We have a great guest with us today, Andrey. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, so Andrey is currently design manager at Beamery. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me kind of how you've embarked on your journey into design specifically, and also for people who don't know, obviously you do design ops as well. How did you get into that?
My route was, from one standpoint, very common, but at the same time, very not straightforward at all. So I went, my education has nothing to do with design, I was like accidentally headhunted by one of the internal teams when I worked as a recruiter.
Oh,
So
nice.
you would never know. I would never know that I would.
How did you find the recruitment?
It was good. My wife is a recruiter.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So this was accidental, but it turned as something that I just like genuinely became passionate about, and then I just followed the gut, followed the opportunities were arising. So I've been in design for over 10 years. As many people do, started in digital design in agencies as a do-it-all designer, and then progressively went into product design. Again, following the gut. And after working for several years in product design, I realized that design systems and design ops and everything about optimizing the processes, structuring everything, this is something that, first of all, this is very natural to me because of my OCD. But at the same time, it is just something that I found it as an opportunity. We needed that. I also came from a personal pain a little bit because as product designer, I had to deal with design systems, with the teams that were running them, and experienced a lot of personal pain of hey, this doesn't seem to be working right. This isn't helpful. I want this to be better. And after a few experiences like that, I realized that can I just try to do this myself?
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, the circumstances were that everyone was very happy for me to do this, for someone to take this on and run. And so this is how I naturally kind of land there.
Interestingly enough, obviously with design system roles, obviously they're quite niche. What strategies have you found when recruiting to find what works to find the right design system designer, and are there certain factors that you need to consider when hiring this specialism?
Totally. My answer will be obviously biased because of my personal experience, because of what I've seen myself, and I've dealt with many companies as an in-house designer, a design system-oriented designer, as a consultant with external companies. What I've seen is there is at least one certain thing that I would call out as a must-have for design systems designer and design ops as well. They have to be product designers to begin with. Product design experience is very, very beneficial because these are the people who would be helping other product designers to make their life easier, to improve their processes, to make them more efficient, to essentially work with them as their customers. And in order to understand their customers, they need to have a good understanding of what they're coming from, what their use cases are. And obviously, when we're working on external products, sometimes we're not necessarily the customers, we're not the users of all these external products. But when it comes to design, having this hands-on experience and understanding is very, very valuable.
Yeah.
So I would be looking for a product designer, ex-product designer, and it could be, they are not necessarily have to be extraordinary experienced, but still. And I would be actually quite surprised and concerned a little bit if a person who had just started their way in product design would jump onto design systems or design ops, because this is something that you're not always decide to do. This is something that oftentimes you would naturally start to be inclined towards.
Yeah.
Again, this is my personal bias, but this is what I've seen, because working on design systems and design ops is this internal facing tooling and enablement. This requires a certain skill set and also certain personal traits.
Yeah.
You have to be very genuinely empathetic about people. You have to be a good communicator because this is what you will do all the time. You have to be comfortable wearing multiple hats all the time because you will be doing so many things.
Yeah.
And finding all that in one single person is challenging. Honestly.
Yeah.
Then it comes to what's the current state there of your company, because I could think of an ideal candidate that would collect all of these traits and that would be perfect for everything. That is really
Everyone would want to hire them.
Yeah, but maybe this is not necessarily who you need at this very point in time. Maybe you're just starting, or you have a very well developed design system, or you have a mentor who can just like navigate them through all the problems, and they could be like a more junior person who have less experience, but they've dealt with design systems before. So when you're starting to look for the kind of person, you need to first come from the current needs of your company and just gauge based on that. So generally speaking, you would be looking for a design generalist role. So a person who can efficiently, they can do a little bit of hands-on design, because this is what they will do from time to time, not just like moving components and pixels in Figma, but also doing some hands-on design if necessary. They should be great communicators, both written and spoken ideally. If not, this is something that they could be coached on and supported with, but they will be doing this a lot. Absolute must that they have to be super empathetic, and they should be like genuinely caring about their customers, internal customers. And the experience, the actual experience with the design systems, this is something that you could vary, and something that you can make like informed and pragmatic decisions on based on the circumstances that you have, the budgets, the time to fill, and so on and so forth, because you can potentially look for a person with who hasn't built the design system before on their own, but they're like a very experienced customer of design systems, and they're like interested, they're like generally passionate about these things. You can help this person go to this trajectory and just move from being a designer to be a design system oriented designer, or you can offer them an opportunity to do this some percentage of their time. This is a very common route for design system people. They started to do this alongside their normal work, and then they fully transition. So everything is available.
Yeah, no, amazing. I was thinking as well, a point you mentioned there with, say, a junior coming into the team, or hiring kind of junior designers. Obviously, they probably earlier on in their career kind of touch on different areas of the design life cycle. As a manager or as a leader of like the design system team, would you recommend all juniors having the chance to touch in some way the design system to see if they've got those kind of softer skills, and whether or not they could find out earlier on in their career that potentially could be a route for them?
I would say that junior, regardless of the seniority, they will be using the design system for sure, because this is an intrinsic part of our work. However, I'm not sure if a person at a very, very junior stage would be the most effective design system designer necessarily. I think it would be the best if they gain a little bit more of a product design experience, hands-on product design experience, and also they have an opportunity to decide on their own what is they're the most passionate about. Maybe the technical side of our design system work would be more interesting to them, or they would find out that, I don't know, they're particularly interested in craft. They want to be the perfect visual designer. So I think when it comes to junior designers, I wouldn't recommend them to constrain themselves too early, because design system or design ops, this is a constraint. This is a very, as you said, niche route and niche specialization within design. So I would, for their own sake, I would recommend them to explore more opportunities and then make sure they come into something.
No, it's a great point. I was only asking just purely because I worked a couple roles before where someone's looking for kind of like a mid-level design system specialist, and they're really hard to find because obviously they're so early. They've probably got 2-3 years experience in design, and they've touched the design system but not necessarily owned a full design system, so kind of asking a lot of someone quite early on. But it's good to hear your point of view. So are you able to discuss the experience of design system specialists in different countries? So obviously, we find the specialists in kind of the UK, but most commonly there's lots of design system specialists across the globe, really. So have you found when hiring these individuals or things like that, like, is there different challenges they may face? Are there different ways they need to adapt if they kind of move countries, or even working remotely in the time that we work?
Totally. As you mentioned yourself, the role itself and this skill set are very rare in their niche, and therefore it is, when you're looking for a person like that for your own sake, it would be the best to expand your search as much as you can, and therefore looking for people who are remote or are in different countries is really good. And this is something that I would definitely recommend, because I know that not all the companies are necessarily open to remote work, and this limits their opportunities for these people as well. From what I see, the specialist roles in design system and design ops becoming more and more common across Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, doesn't matter, but it becomes more common. More companies identify that they actually want to invest in a dedicated specialist, and therefore they are given opportunities to people to grow into that and develop the skills. So we have more people on the market, but it's definitely hard to find. And so many factors come into play. So I mentioned their location, and related to that, visa.
Yeah.
This is a huge thing, because for obvious reasons, investing into visa for a company is not necessarily something that we would like to do.
Yeah.
And for people to acquire this visa could be challenging, especially when they're probably earlier in their career, or they could have all sorts of circumstances of their own in their own country at the moment. So it's twice as challenging. The language barrier is a huge thing. Last year, I remember we ran a webinar specifically on the topic of English for designers, because this is such a common thing. Last year, we had a huge wave of people who were really interested in relocating and finding jobs abroad, but they're all struggled with the same problem of language barrier, because it's not necessarily that common in all countries to invest into developing your language, or develop it to the point where you would be able to effectively communicate and work in that language when you are not necessarily in design, and specifically not in design systems position. The requirements for your language could be different. You're not communicating as much, but in design systems role, you have to be able to persuade other people to effectively communicate with them and build engagement and so on and so forth. So having a strong language skills is important. So a strong language level.
Yeah.
So these are the types of challenges that I see, and my best recommendation is to try to be a bit more flexible from both sides. For companies to be a bit more open to remote workers, for potential candidates who are looking for these jobs to also be more open to the fact, to several things, to the fact that we could be working remote, which is not necessarily something that they might have considered, but also to be looked at from a slightly different point of view, because what I personally experienced is when you are moving to a different country, you would find that the requirements, the levels of expectations are significantly different sometimes. What we mean by a middle level product designer in one country could be drastically different to another country. And for many people, this means that when they're relocating and embarking on a journey in a new company, or just applying for a role, they have like mixed expectations.
Yeah.
Really. And or they have to downscale a lot, and this causes a lot of frustration. I've come through.
Know the struggle.
Yeah, because when you have some established career, you've been doing this for some time, and you have a certain like understanding of yourself, who you are as a specialist, and then you move to another country and you have to drop a few roles down. You have to, you're perceived differently. You have to, from scratch to a certain degree, prove to everyone that you're worthy.
Yeah.
And this is really hard, and this is something that not necessarily everyone is ready for. But in the current environment, when companies have to optimize their like hiring processes, they have their tight on the budget, and at the same time they don't always have access to right talent. I think everyone should be more flexible.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say that people have to potentially drop down a level, because I've spoken to candidates across Europe who sometimes say they really want to come to the UK and work for, I don't know, let's say like a bigger unicorn company, for example, but the companies they've worked in a different country might not necessarily have been well known. So the hiring managers don't necessarily look at their work and value it as much as a well-known brand that we know in kind of the UK market. It's super interesting, but necessarily their skills, they've got 5 years of really great experience. The companies they've worked for in their country could be the equivalent of the companies that we have here as well.
That's why it is important to look not at necessarily the experience in the companies that you might not know, but at their skills. What are the skill sets that you're looking for? Is there an opportunity for you to prove that this person has the skills?
Yeah.
And yeah, this is a different territory of like design portfolios and for design portfolios for design systems designers.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to go into this, but yeah, looking at skills instead of just purely experience would be one of the things.
Definitely, I totally agree. So as you mentioned in your previous point about the hot topic of portfolios, is there any difference between, product design portfolios and design system specialist designers portfolios? What are the key differences you see, or is there a difference?
So as I mentioned, the design systems and design ops designers, first and foremost, they are ex or current product designers. So their portfolio would consist of product design work, for sure, and it should reflect some of the product design work, as they need to understand the basics of product development process. We need to understand that the visual design skills are there, like even the basic ones. They're not necessarily have to be specialists, but still. So these like basic things. Also the way how they communicate, because portfolio is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate whether or not you can construct a narrative. So there is a whole lot you can tell, but can you tell this succinct and engaging enough for people to read it really and to read it end to end, or they will just drop like immediately?
Yeah.
So that's important, because this is what they will be doing. They will have to do this communication a lot. When it comes to design systems themselves, this depends on what are like the level of the person you're looking for. So if this person have just begun and their portfolio, their case for design system is just like, hey, we put together some UI library in Figma and we went through like some first steps into the design system world. That's fine if this person just begins. But when you're looking for a person who you might want them to drive the whole process end to end, this is where they should go beyond that. They should demonstrate that, okay, I cannot just like move pixels in Figma, which everyone can do, but I can do all sorts of things that bring me into this territory of like entrepreneur. This is like a special thing about design system specialists. They have to be a little bit of entrepreneurs, because they will be fighting for engagement, thinking about metrics for their own like internal product. They will be constructing like their all sorts of narratives, engaging with stakeholders. They'll be doing everything that product designer does and everything that product manager does sometimes. So they will demonstrate this multi-instrumentality. And this is what I would be looking for in a person that could be design system lead.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of the skills you're describing there is definitely, I think, comes with experience within your field. I was speaking to someone not too long ago about how designers at some point in your career, to kind of step to the next level, you have to almost switch on that business side of things. And I think that also goes for whether you're a product designer, whether you're design system specialist, whether you just do UI, whether you just do UX. Like at some point, to kind of get the seat at the table, so to speak, it's switching on the business mind and knowing when to do that.
There is also, if we move a little bit away from design system and speak about design ops, they have their own specifics. So for design ops, you would be demonstrating how the things that you've implemented, all these process optimizations and tools, potentially automations, whatever, how they have driven some positive outcome. So it's not about just, I've implemented that kind of process, but what this process had cost. Have designers become more efficient or fast, or the quality has risen? And if so, how can you demonstrate that? So again, this is the same kind of business acumen that we would expect from product designers, but just applied to a different
discipline. And I think that impact section is key as well. Totally. Just finding out what actually was achieved by your work. So would you recommend design ops people to have a case studies together and things like that?
Totally. The same kind of case studies, they will probably be less visual oriented. They would be less for you to demonstrate sometimes. Still something, you put together some Figma templates for everyone, or even if it's a process and the only thing you can show is a Confluence page, sometimes that's not a problem, because as a design ops specialist, I understand that what you're dealing with. So I would level my expectations with that. So that's completely fine, as long as you can create this narrative that would explain what's the outcome.
No, definitely. So obviously, as we're on the topic of design systems and design operations, have there been any kind of methods, I suppose, that you have used or found that have helped raise the quality bar within teams that you've worked in? Or
I think when it comes to design systems and design ops, everything that we do is targeted to raise the quality bar. It's making designers more effective at pace with a desired outcome of the raised quality bar. A lot of things that we're doing is not necessarily in regards to design systems, more design ops, but aligning on certain key principles and even characteristics and definitions of things, because sometimes within the company we could be talking about things like good UI or modern UI or customer delight, and you would hear stakeholders saying that, hey, we want to have more customer delight, or we want our UI to look more modern. And no one would ever know what this means. And this causes a lot of confusion, and designers do not necessarily know what to optimize for. So this is something that design ops can potentially help with, or design leadership in general. So we can help the team to align on certain characteristics of this thing, to define it clearly and then document. And documentation in general is the thing that we do a lot. We're constantly trying to identify what are the things, so recurring patterns, recurring activities that designers have to do. How can we turn them into playbooks and document and give easy access to, so that designers can replicate the same result really quickly, and they would always know what to do in certain common situations. For that reason, we're creating these playbooks and templates as well, lots and lots of templates. And they're really helping, because in normal situations, they would help you to achieve the same result quicker, and if not elevate the quality bar, then at least maintain it, to ensure that the quality bar is at the bar that we set for it. It's interesting when you are able to apply all that a little bit beyond your normal territory. So what happened recently was that we were, with design systems and design ops, you're doing all sorts of standard things. You're optimizing components all the time, introducing new tools and automations, sort of things. And everyone is very familiar with how Figma works and how components works. And you can start to believe that everyone knows how to do that. But if you look just a little bit aside from this territory, for example, marketing design.
Okay.
So these guys are dealing with slightly different tool space and different environment, different types of tasks, and this means that they're not necessarily as friendly with Figma as we would expect, or like as we are, and so we have this bias that everyone knows Figma exactly as we are. So identifying that, hey, these guys could actually benefit from the very same things that product designers, and even when you implement the smallest optimizations, this would make their life so much easier. They I don't know, you touched a couple of components, you turned, or you just simply turned things that they do into components. They would never think about that because they're not optimizing for this. And this would dramatically change their life. So just looking broader than your normal kind of customer sets is also beneficial.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And when you kind of do look broader, so for the example with the marketing design team, how do you go about implementing that? Usually are they open to it, or is it something you have to speak to the leadership team to implement, or how does that work?
They would be very grateful if you demonstrate how this works and demonstrate that this tangibly improves their lives, because not only with marketing designers, but with any designer, they have to be effective at pace, as I mentioned. So they have to move really fast, and they don't necessarily always have an opportunity to just stop and learn something new. Introducing something new is a part of the design ops kind of role day to day, but you can face a lot of inertia and a lot of resistance, because this makes a person immediately slower in the moment. So when you are able to very vividly demonstrate to them that, hey, it's not just about the fact that we're asking you to do the same thing in a different way, but this is how we can do the same thing twice as fast, thrice as fast, and so on. So with our marketing designers, we demonstrate that the huge ad campaigns that you're doing with hundreds of assets. Previously, you had to spend hours on them. Now you can do this in a number of minutes. And
why wouldn't you want to?
So it's an opportunity. It's great when you have an opportunity to demonstrate this so clearly. Other times it might take a little bit of persuasion. But that's fine. This is part of our job.
And I guess also kind of speaking about kind of raising the quality of the team and the bar and stuff like that. I guess working at different companies as well, you've learned the way different companies work, whether it be a bigger company and then take all of that to a smaller company. There's experience probably helps a lot with that as well.
And it's dramatically different, especially when it comes to marketing. It's not necessarily the topic of this conversation, but marketing teams could be organized and run in so many different ways across different companies. So in sometimes, and it happens quite often, product designers just don't have any connection with them whatsoever. So it's great when you do it and when you are able to influence them and to make them better, because what it does, apart from just helping people, it also helps you to demonstrate the ROI of design ops and design systems. That we are able to drive certain change within the company even broader than our initial remit.
I think that everyone always has that, probably a longer topic of conversation, but how do you actually, what's the return of investment of design ops? Well, you've just proved it.
It's only one tiny portion of it. For design ops, actually marketing design is a little bit easier here, because these guys are they're working like a digital agency, in-house digital agency. So a lot of activities that they do is heavily counted. So you can count the number of tickets that they're working on, the time it takes, and so on and so forth. It's much easier to demonstrate the positive change. When it comes to product design, it's very long-term change, because you are but still some opportunities. For example, it would be just less quantitative metrics and more qualitative. So, for example, you're introduced a new process for onboarding designers, like when new designers come to the company, and you collect this feedback from them, and this is a data point. You can run NPS and CSAT within the design team to collect their the way how they think about their design system and design ops experience. Has it changed anything for them? So still there are opportunities, but yeah, it's a little bit more difficult when you're dealing with product design.
That's why I guess the metrics and impact matter at that point then as well. So what are the key differences from your experience with design systems within different organizations, and have you found like the composition of design system teams changed, and like what impact that has on the effectiveness of the business?
So the differences in design systems or design system teams in different companies depend on the current stage of evolution of the design system in the company, if it exists at all.
Yeah.
And by the way, not every company necessarily needs a design system, because if you are at the very beginning, you're like a startup that is likely to pivot or just like find its like product market fit, you're not necessarily want to invest into something that is like more long-term oriented, because
that makes
despite its benefits, it could be like an immediate kind of it could cause a little bit of inertia. This is not necessarily something that you want. It is great when you're able to lay some foundations that you can reuse later and build on top of. It's better than having nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think usually companies start to think about design systems when they're like at a closer to scale up.
Yeah.
So when they went through this like high growth, super fast paced stage, they are able to breathe out, look back, and see, my God, now we need to start moving like a little bit slower, optimize certain things, because we want to not only run fast but also run sustainably, and so on and so forth. At this point, they usually start to think about design systems.
Yeah.
And there are multiple different team formats, team structures for design system teams. So usually it all starts with something that I would call, for the lack of better words, embedded team. So this means that an individual or a couple of individuals, they would start to dedicate a little bit of their like portion of their time to that. So they're not team yet. They're just like people or like virtual team that starts to like spend 20% of their time on design system activities. Sometimes it starts with engineers because they have natural tendency to optimize everything. They want to save their time to be more efficient. This is really good. Designers also want to do that. So this usually starts between design and engineering.
Yeah.
Once they've proved a little bit of return of investment, or they are very persuasive enough to convince the leadership to invest a little more into it, they could start progressively moving towards a dedicated person or start forming a team.
Yeah.
Some companies took a leap of faith and they start investing into the whole blown team. That's great, that's impressive, but this would be difficult because they won't see a lot of results in the next year and a half.
Yeah.
It could be a long time.
Yeah.
And this is one of the biggest problems, because it is very important to explain to everyone what they should expect. So once they moved to this dedicated team, say, they could evolve, they can turn into something like a more of a product team, and the design system evolves with them. And then you have different opportunities. So for example, you can move into a federated mode, where instead of having this like a big team that will be ever growing, you decide that, okay, we will have a few people to maintain the design system, just to do the due diligence, but the rest will be handled by the people themselves. So designers and engineers, they would form a council, or they would just, you would have like people within product and design who are just more passionate about that, and they will be all contributing to the system and help to evolve it. this is not only like a stage of evolution, but this also sometimes could be a solution in case of crisis, because you might face a situation where a company is not ready to invest into the design system anymore. It could be just like a difficult period for a company, or it could be just a loss of faith, which happens.
Yeah.
So this is something that you can move towards in order to help the design system just like not fall out. And in some companies, it's actually like a very preferred way, because let's say you have a company with many thousands of people. You cannot possibly keep up with the growth of that company or just be a service team for everyone. You have to invest a huge ton into growing that team. In the likes of IBM, the design system teams could be like close to 100 people.
Yeah,
And
that's huge.
That's a huge investment. So what you can do is move slightly towards this federated technology, where you would still have some people, but the rest would be embedded into different teams, so the whole system would be federated.
You say, for example, you do have a team like that, so the IBMs of the world. Obviously, the kind of basis of the design system is most likely built. Is it just maintaining the design system at that point, or?
So it's mainly maintaining, but also evolving. I used to work at Intercom, and I used to help the company shift from a dedicated team to federated mode. And what we had is we established a process for easy contribution for designers and engineers, so that we are not only just maintaining, keep it alive, but we also have an easy instruments to evolve it to a certain degree, because designers will keep introducing new components. That's the nature of the work. And we want to have instruments for that, because if they just at some point stop doing that and kind of forget about the design system, that all the work before was for nothing, right? And the more you kind of streamline that process and work with the barrier of entry, the better it is for everyone. This is a whole different topic. This is a big conversation.
We have to be here for another hour.
Yeah, and it's not a like completely solved problem. I wouldn't say that it's a solution for everything, but this is something that I see working, and I will keep thinking that this is a good solution at certain points in time. There is also one other potential way of working, which caused me a lot of trouble at the beginning of my career. This is something that actually raised my interest in design systems, because it caused a lot of pain.
It's usually those painful problems which it gives you the most passion, though.
Yeah, so this is another type of the design system team when they operate as internal open source or something. They're not dedicated, they're isolated. So you have a dedicated team, but they're not necessarily speaking to anyone. They're just developing this design system a little bit in vacuum, and they expect the rest of the company to consume it. They can take potentially some feedback, but not necessarily actively working with you to develop the system. So this again could happen with the likes of IBM or like these giant companies, where they cannot possibly kind of work with the requirements of every single individual, because there are like thousands and thousands of them, right? So they decided, okay, we will go our own way. We know what's the best for everyone. We would listen to your feedback, but we cannot promise you anything. And this is an approach that could be, potentially it could be, but I personally experienced a lot of pain, because it's so frustrating when you realize that you're expected to use something that does not necessarily at all align with your requirements and needs. Why would they do that? And I heard people who also experienced this in different companies, when there is not always enough of things. There would be not enough of components, because again they're introducing them in vacuum, and the components you have, they would not necessarily fit your use cases, so you have to deviate. So yeah, it's a tricky thing. I would definitely not recommend it to, but it's a potential opportunity at certain scale of the company.
Yeah, well that's super interesting, and I mean, it's good to have that experience behind you to know how to navigate it if it ever comes at you again, I guess. So Are you able to speak on like the concept of treating the design system team as a product team and what those like potential benefits associated with such an approach?
So when we spoke about the skill set that a product designer working on design systems or design system designer should have, we mentioned all the things that are like entrepreneurial, like that they have to be good communicators, they have to be able to persuade people, they have to be able to raise engagement and to be able to express themselves in written and spoken forms and be also like designers at the same time. And all that comes from all the activities that they will have to do day to day. And so the concept of a design system team as a product team stems from all the activities that they have to do. So they obviously need to work with their audience to identify their needs, just like a product team, right? You need to, instead of just building some components in backend without everyone knowing or caring, you need to identify the needs and tailor your activities to these needs. You will have to kind of build your own roadmap to identify and plan ahead of what you're going to do and allow your customers to input into that roadmap to tell you, hey, this is something that we're interested in, this is something that we don't care at all, so please prioritize these things. Again, very similar to product teams. Next, you would be when you're delivering something to them, you want them to care, to be excited about it, so and therefore you will be experimenting with messaging, so this is your engagement part. Next, you would look at whether or not your solutions work. So you would be collecting feedback, you would be looking at metrics if they exist, and tweaking your solutions as you go. So again, very, very, very similar. And this is why I think that when we are just starting initially to form our design system teams from that standpoint, when we're looking for all these skill sets, then it just makes things easier. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to have all these specialists within your design system team, because it's really hard. You won't be able to hire both a PM, QA engineer, and so on and so forth within your team. It's great if you can, but it's not always.
Yeah.
So this means that design system designer, driver, or whoever, they would be wearing a top of hats on their own. And it is very important for them to also find a partner who can share some of these responsibilities with them, be it an engineering manager, design manager, someone that can, for example, play a role of a stakeholder manager for them.
Yeah.
To help you to sell this whole thing and keep it going. Or to find a really great engineer, because the majority of your team will consist of engineers when we're talking about design systems. So you need a really good person who can orient them around the common goals.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of tools that you're going to be using are very similar to the tools of product teams. For example, our team uses product board a lot to collect feedback, to plan and prioritize. We have a public roadmap by product board, which is very convenient.
Yeah.
At Intercom, we were using Intercom.
They have their own internal systems. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, as a product team, or as a product, even internal little product, we have customer support. Again, this function is shared between all of us, but we still have some form of support. So why don't we use the tool that is dedicated for support teams? And so thinking about yourself as a little product helps you to identify the goals and the next steps sometimes. Because I remember when I had just begun, it was really hard for me to identify what's most important right now. Should I just invest everything into building new components, or something else, or how would I even know? And when you're a product team, you always have instruments and tools and processes for doing that. So one other thing that is important for you to identify is what are the actual company's needs. So you would be listening to your users, you would be looking at metrics, all this is good, it's necessary, but At the same time, there is some product strategy. There is a business strategy. So, for example, we have clients who are really dependent on, who have like certain accessibility needs, because this is their legal requirement or something. We have clients who need our tool to be multilingual, or they have certain requirements when it comes to performance of their tool. All these are things that design system enables. So apart from just listening to your customers and learning about what components you need to build next, you can take these insights from the leadership and help to and use them to define the strategy. Because at the end of the day, you need to prove the ROI of your team. You need to keep it alive, essentially, to keep the investment going. Because this is a leap of faith. Investment into the design system team is a leap of faith for the company. So you need to demonstrate that what you're doing contributes to the business strategy. Which means that this is the way how you would be like selecting your like activities sometimes, or the way how the lens through which you will be communicating your activities. So for example, we're not just like building certain components or like helping a specific team, but we're driving the initiative of our company to become like more accessibility oriented. So we'll ensure that everything that design system delivers will be AA compliant in terms of accessibility compliance, and therefore the teams that use the design system will automatically become compliant with that. And this becomes a driver for your design system, because this is what you will be doing all the time, trying to find ways to drive that investment.
Yeah. So best practices, I assume, are super important to make this happen. On just being kind of like devil's advocate, are there any have you found when you've worked, obviously everyone kind of raves about best practices and obviously they're super important and some companies don't have them and you need to implement, etc. Have you found that in certain situations or certain companies or certain stages where the company's at, that sometimes best practices, like there's sometimes like really adhering to it strictly? Is there any disadvantages to that? Have you got any experience within that?
Definitely, in my current company, when we started building the design system from the very beginning, I was coming from the standpoint of best practices.
Yeah.
I have, as a person who's been working on that for a long while, I have some certain established experience or just like ways of working. I know that these are usually the things that you would be starting with and so on and so forth, but actually every company is different, and it is at a different stage. It has its own priorities and various different circumstances. So whatever works in one company is not necessarily directly applicable to another. So coming with all your these like predispositions or like your biases to a different company is not always supposed to work.
Yeah.
So what you do is, as just mentioned, you would be orienting yourself against not best practices that are in vacuum, but towards the business needs.
Yeah.
So if your company currently really needs to drive certain metric or initiative or something, you need to find a way to enable that. Because design outs, design systems, all that is about enabling, helping others to achieve certain things.
And I guess being adaptable as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was not particularly happy about doing something not by the book and not necessarily in the order.
Especially you mentioned with your OCD as well, I can imagine.
Started. Yeah. When you work with the engineers who also sometimes they would optimize for different things. And you as a designer with OCD specifically, so you would have your own idea of a quality bar or an order of doing certain things, but you may end up with a thing where you would have to essentially fly your plane as you're building it, right? So would you have to, for example, implement certain parts of the design system where it's not yet fully fleshed out, or demonstrate certain parts that are not they're not polished yet.
Yeah.
Or, for example, what happens with me is we had to instead of the standard situation where you would design all the components, hand them over to engineers, and then they would implement them and deliver to everyone. We would have a situation where I would be designing components simultaneously to engineers developing them. So we would pick a third-party library that would give us like all the technical guts of a component. They would take it, they would start already kind of using it in their own work, and simultaneously to that, or even after that, I would be applying all the styles to it. And this felt super counterintuitive at the very beginning, but it appeared to be the right way.
Yeah, so just proofs in it that sometimes you don't always have to follow the rules.
Start small,
Yeah.
and look at what your company needs right now, and fight your biases. These are
Pick your
learning
battles.
for this as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you envision like for the future of design systems, and what are your thoughts on that kind of like ever evolving landscape of this field, as well as obviously design operations as well, I think both.
So what we've seen in the past number of years is that from a buzzword, design systems and design ops become just like an intrinsic part of our day-to-day. They're like embedded into work structures. They're like less and less convincing is required for product teams to embark on that.
Yeah.
And I hope for this to trend to continue. What could change is the level of investment, and this could vary on so many circumstances, because we know this like macroeconomics could impact that a lot.
Yeah.
So actually at some point more convincing might be required, and because of that we need to think a lot about how can we improve the ROI of all that. The biggest problem is that both design system, less design ops, but design systems for sure, this is a long-term investment. They would demonstrate that some positive outcomes only after like year and a half and more. So being able to communicate that, but also from the very beginning be super mindful of what's the image of your work, how can you demonstrate it in a very, very like engaging way, how can you speak to your stakeholders' needs. These are like the critical things, because otherwise you would be like continuously losing the investments. So the level of investment could vary. I hope that we would not be questioning again whether or not we need to even invest into these things. They're just given.
Yeah.
Then it all depends on where the tech development goes in general, because what I hope to see is that the lines between design and engineering will blend more and more. And so why do we need design systems in the first place? Because there is a problem where, like intrinsic problem, where designer needs an engineer to implement something. So they're thinking this through, then they're visualize it in a certain way, then they have to deliver it to a specialized person who is capable of turning this like representation of something into something that works.
Yeah.
All that sounds very broken. So why do I need to go through so many steps in order for your like UI or whatever to work?
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that all of these steps will be progressively reduced. The number of the steps will progressively reduce. Does this mean that designers will start coding more, or other way around? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It means that we just need to have less friction between within this process.
It's a common theme between designers and engineers, isn't it?
And it doesn't necessarily mean that we need to very quickly acquire new skills. No, it just means that we need to identify a way of reducing this friction. We've just recently seen how AI helps with
I was
that.
going to mention that as
well.
well, yeah.
Generated AI that could solve some of these problems, not all, but still. And so this is like one direction. Another thing is about the understanding of what UI means, and how it manifests itself will change as well.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll, in like several years, in like 5-7 years, we'll end up in a world which is more non-UI or no UI than it is right now. So we will be less reliant on like these traditional screens in the way how they are right now. Things will be more like voice-based, or something
Who
else.
knows?
Yeah, so design systems will continue to be to exist, but there are form by transition slightly, because currently when you think of a design system, you imagine buttons. Maybe we will not need buttons at some point, or there will be something else that represents a button, or this physical component. Maybe that we will not we won't have these constraints when it comes to technical implementation of these buttons, and therefore what design system specialists do will be slightly different.
Yeah.
But the enablement part will remain the same, I hope so.
Yeah. So that goes back to those kind of core key skills, soft skills that will remain the same, even if, well, obviously our technology will evolve in 7 years. So who knows what the future. I'm imagining a screen and we're just touching imaginary buttons. But yeah, who knows? And then everything you said there is super interesting about like the future of that. But obviously kind of with the way the world is at the moment, and kind of like even the next year in terms of future, how do you see kind of, obviously we've seen lots of like layoffs and people being impacted with redundancies and things like that. With the future of being a design system specialist, how do you see that in we're paying X amount for this specialist, or how do you kind of see that as well?
What we see, I think, across all different fields, not just design systems, is that we need to do more with less, right? So we need to become more of generalists. We need to be more hands-on, and this is the trend everywhere. And I think this will continue right now, because we have to use our existing resources as effective as we could. Design system, it's in a very vulnerable position because of all I mentioned before, that the value is delayed and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's hard to communicate it. At the same time, design system and design ops are exactly the things that help companies to go effectively through that tough period, right? Because what they do is they're making designers, engineers effective at pace. And when you are going through a tough period, you have layoffs, or you're cutting all the budgets, and you need to do more with less resources. You need to use these resources as effective as you could. So you need to help your engineers avoid reinventing the wheel. You need to for your designers to have a ton of templates that they can use in order to create their mock-ups or the visual work as quickly as they could. So it is important for us to find ways to communicate this to business, and also to find ways to de-risk our positions. For design system people, this means that we need to find a way to embed ourselves in the org structure in such a way that we're in a very solid place. What happens also
not disposable.
So people could understand our value very well, but at the same time, if we are in a weird, some odd, miscellaneous place within the org structure, it could not be immediately clear to people who are very distant from that, for example, some business function, finance function. They might not understand what this guy does. And if they were like a product designer, if they were in that bucket, they would be much safer. So I think for all design and design ops people, it is important to understand how can we kind of embed ourselves into the structure in a more safe zone. Sometimes this could mean that you're not calling yourself design ops anymore. Possibly. Not necessarily the best solution, but I would consider that at least. Maybe this means that you become a part-time product designer as a one option. So this is something that I did at Intercom, where we were going through layoffs. I had to de-risk my position and the situation in general. So we brought the design system to a place where it's self-sustainable, and I was able to switch to product design work and then come back if necessary.
Because part of your job's going to be part of maintaining that and evolving it anyway. Yeah.
So being flexible and thinking about the different scenarios, how it goes.
Another word that I mentioned earlier, adaptable. It seems to be a key theme.
Yeah.
So looking back at your career and kind of how far you've come now, like, do you have any advice that you would give to your younger self or those aspiring to kind of climb the ladder in the field of design? Is there any kind of thing poignant you would tell them?
As I was describing the way how I landed in designing in the first place, it was a very indirect route. So what I would personally recommend is to don't constrain yourself too early. As a designer who only starts this journey, what you would like to do most probably is to try various different things to identify what you're naturally more inclined to. Maybe you won't find that immediately. Maybe what you will find is that design is not necessarily what you're most passionate about, and you will find some adjacent path for you. But doing more would be super beneficial, and this is what I did to a certain degree when I went to a digital agency. They will be throwing all sorts of projects at you. So you will hate some things very, very quickly and identify that, hey, I don't know, I like talking to people. I like to, optimize certain things. Or I'm super passionate about visual design. I like animation, creating animation, certain type of things. Or things are, you will identify that certain things just click, or they're much easier for you, or you're naturally inclined to. So identifying those are the most helpful probably, and don't try to put a label on you too early to say I'm a visual designer, I'm brand designer or whatever. Yeah. It's good to kind of attribute yourself to a certain group, but it's not something that you would benefit you at a very early stage.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Well, hopefully someone listening might take that on board. I think also just jumping on that as well, I think I speak to companies a lot now who actually offer people to do sort of upskill. They might be a designer, but the company offer them to do if you're interested in coding, you might be able to do a course in that. And so finding companies that have really good learning development benefits, and
also horizontal mobility.
Yeah,
that would be super beneficial as well if you can at least try something in a different kind of department of your company. For example, at Intercom we used to have this concept of tours where designers would join different teams for a short period of time, and they would have more exposure to different parts of the project, but also they would be able to eventually do something that they haven't done before in their own team. That's super beneficial.
Yeah, no, that sounds it. Sounds it.
So how about I return your question? And
not me on the hot seat.
So we spoke a little bit about what we're expecting from designers in the current and the companies in current circumstances, what they should expect, what they should optimize for. But with your exposure to the market, to the hiring process, to the kinds of problems that designers could be dealing with, maybe you can also provide some insight to us when it comes to what makes people in this niche role, especially in this niche roles, more successful as candidates, or these kind of things that would help to make this conversation even more practical.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, we have helped hire design system specialists for kind of bigger organizations and also kind of fast startups. And what I find they are looking for, which is actually quite generic for these companies. So I don't think it's going to differ too much from company to company, and I don't know if you find it when you're hiring as well, but being able to just articulate what good looks like. So I know in the conversation that we've just had, you mentioned on someone's portfolio, that storytelling piece is really, really important. So it doesn't matter whether you're a product designer, design system specialist, UX, UI, maybe not so much UI because sometimes you just show the screens, but really just being able to tell your story. So what what did you have when you first joined? What was the challenge? What was the problem? Who was the user? How did I overcome these problems? Who did I collaborate with? What work, and also like what work did I do? Like, and also what work did the team do? Being able to, from my point of view, and interviewing and just being able to articulate that on your portfolio, because it's all well and good being able to articulate it in an interview, but unfortunately we know that you need the portfolio first. That's a common debate as well, I know. And trust me, I do, if anyone is watching, and I work with clients, I do, if you don't have your portfolio, I will go through it on a screen share, and I will then tell the client I have seen their portfolio, like their live work, because I feel like having someone to kind of back that up is always a good thing.
I don't know if as a hiring manager I would trust that.
That's fine.
No, this is really helpful, because sometimes you might not have a hiring manager who is like a specialist in this particular area. So
no, it's true.
Any insight from a recruiter.
Well, the thing is, and I think, shameless plug here, but the way we work differently at Wave is every company we work with, or like hiring manager we work with, like we want to know your design team. So I've gone and worked, I spent the day, took my laptop and worked, and just like gone in a workshop and see how you actually, and like the designers work and they interact. So really, if I'm hiring for your role, if you allow me to really have a 360 view of your design team and what it is what's good, even if you go, this is my best designer on my team, this is what his portfolio looks like, or her portfolio, or their portfolio. If you can get me another one of these, and this is what I find good, realistically, I don't have a reason of why I shouldn't be able to find that, or if I'm looking at someone's work on the screen that I can't kind of pick that out. And obviously, yes, I'm not a designer by trade or anything like that, but boy, I see a lot of portfolios.
The best proactive reach out I had from a recruiter once was when they recorded a long video of them going from my portfolio website. They were not a designer.
Don't tell them.
Yeah, but they were like just going from my website and saying, "Hey, Andrey, I really like your portfolio. This project is good." And that felt so personal.
Exactly. And you kind of go, oh, wow, they're a recruiter, but they know what they're talking about. They kind of, like, someone who doesn't know design wouldn't be able to probably point out the things that they had pointed out. And then just, if we're going to talk about design system as well, I would probably say a lot of the companies that we've helped kind of hire design system specialists, they always mention like having a good like foundational knowledge of like atomic design and stuff like that. Like that seems to be quite a key ongoing trend.
I absolutely hate atomic.
Controversial. Everyone knows that the market at the moment is harder. I think whichever discipline you're in, it's difficult at the moment. So there's probably no like secret tip I can give people. I think it's just, roles are going out at the moment, and how it's about making yourself stand out amongst other design system specialists that can do the same job as you, other product designers that on paper look like they can do the same job as you. So what are you doing that's different? Can you put quite a personal deck together? Can you like spruce up, like even if you don't want to, put those latest projects on your portfolio? There's lots of different outreaches you can have to kind of make yourself stand out. Maybe start going to meetups, maybe do talks like this if you can, or panel talks. Like, what are you doing to stand out, and what other value add can you add to the company other than just your job? I think at the moment in this tricky time, that's probably what's going to help. So thanks for such an insightful conversation. I actually learned so much around design systems, design ops, and just having your kind of different perspective on that was super, super insightful. And I'm pretty sure hopefully anyway, and I'm sure they will, other people who are watching are going to feel the same way.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a really nice conversation.
Yeah.
We're trying to make it generally applicable to various different people who are like maybe like already doing some design system work already, or just considering doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully this will be like very useful.
Definitely. I think if someone's considering it after this conversation, they're probably going to go to their boss and say, hey, can I want some more design system work. So yeah.
Also, it's not easy to make design system conversation so super engaging, so we did our best.
Yeah, I'm sure we succeeded, don't worry. There's also editing. But yeah, no, thank you. If you enjoyed what you heard today and you want to listen to some more episodes and watch more episodes of Inez Talks, just follow our Wave YouTube in the comments. Thanks.